Okay. All right. Hello, and welcome to Mind the Music, the podcast series where we sit down or stand or crouch and talk to musicians and sometimes mental health professionals about the intersection between being a musician and the myriad aspects of mental health, wellness, the state of our marbles, and multitudinous tangents thereof. Maybe it's quitting a band because of depression. Maybe it's discovering a knack for a musical instrument that we never believed possible, and it bolsters our confidence and drips and sloshes into other areas of our life. Or we get ill before we go on stage because of stage fright. I'm your host, Trevor Lowell Clements. Today, we are talking with Braedon V, an artist, producer, and DJ, among other things. And we'll be talking about some different things. I think, we may touch on some things like work overload versus underload, career and financial uncertainties, perhaps performance anxiety, other stressors, and we'll also try to talk a little bit about some coping mechanisms. These are some of the stuff that Braedon was so kind as to send me so that I could be prepared. So, Braedon, hello, and welcome to Mind the Music. You are, I believe, our third guest. The second one hasn't gone to air yet, or
right.
Can we call it air still when we're
I think it's still live, I guess, live or
it goes through Wi-Fi. It's going through the air.
That's a good point.
So actually, that's one of these metaphors that still can kind of it can still hold up. So. You had me on your podcast a while back, so it was, I was happy to be able to repay the favor. That was a while ago, so I don't quite remember, everything we talked about. But for me, like you said there just a little bit before we started recording, and I put it in there, the coping mechanisms. That's sometimes one of them is how I approach working with other, musicians or artists and bands, right? Because you have a choice. It could be we all try to help each other out, or it could be, let's cut throats and try to, I think. What do you think, like as artists, what would you say our personalities are? Do you think that they're a little bit sometimes sensitive?
Oh, yeah, big time. I think I can say from a personal perspective for sure that I'm very sensitive, and like I'm the type that I'll like certain things in movies will make me tear up, or like I'll listen to a song and I'll tear up sometimes, you know what I mean? Like once in a while, I'm very emotional that way. In general, I think artists, and I come from hip hop where there's a lot of tough guy attitude, but I think underneath that is a lot more sensitivity, even in particular in that kind of a genre, than maybe some other genres. Now that said, for all kinds of genres, I think artists in general are often very self-aware, and that leads to insecurities and maybe other issues that could arise from it. But yeah, I think there's definitely sensitivity from artists. I mean, anytime you create something and you put it in the world, it's kind of like your baby in a way. Like you kind of have some sense of like, you know what I mean? So anytime that gets criticized, you almost take it personally too, even though it's no longer, like it feels like a part of you, even though it's, no longer, right? Yeah. As artists, I think we, in general, have to remember that once we put it out into the world, we have to let go of that personal and it's impossible to do, really. I swear, like it's really difficult because anytime somebody will say something bad about one of my songs, I might be like, I don't know if I agree. You know what I mean, or whatever. Or I'll have some kind of justification as to why they're wrong or whatever. And that's usually a defense mechanism. I mean, music is so subjective. Like some people are gonna like it, some aren't.
It can be a shade of degrees too, right?
100%.
Like, can't you? Where like you can take, some offense, or you can take a lot of offense, and that's not even necessarily directly always aligned with your personality, like as if it's a hard, fast rule. I mean, you can have a day where everything rolls off your back, and then you can have a day where it's like, somebody, didn't say hello quite as loudly as they usually do.
Yeah, that's right. It could be a little thing that that's right. Yeah, it's funny how that works too, right? And it could be like who says it or how they say it or whatever too. I take criticisms from my peers much more seriously than like, some person on the internet. You know what I mean? Like whenever somebody comments on a TikTok or whatever, I pay very little credence to it because take 2 seconds to think. They're not even thinking about it a lot of times. You know what I mean? Whereas the people that I'm in a studio with spending hours on a project, if they say something down the line about that project, I go, like, kind of, that's when I go, like, oh man, like I've worked on projects with people where they kind of said, like, without kind of maybe giving away what they said about it because it would, maybe give away who they were. I felt like they undermined their own work on the project by kind of they almost felt like it didn't get the maybe recognition that the track got in some ways or something. Like, I don't know, not like it blew up or something, you know what I mean? I'm not like a famous artist, but like, I almost felt like they went like, well, it didn't really deserve blah. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute, but you worked on that track. Like, don't you think, aren't you proud of the work you did, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm proud of the work I do. I won't put the track out anymore unless I'm like, I'm really proud of that work. Otherwise, I'll every time I listen to it, I'll be thinking about all the things I could have done better on it. And I hate that. But with artists, there's a lot of sensitivity, and then, like you said, it depends on the day, it depends on who it is, how it's said. Maybe you're feeling a particular way that day, and like you said, it's all over the place.
I want to circle back to something a little bit that you mentioned a little while ago. So you were talking about hip hop and how there is a certain amount of let's say machismo, right? Like within that hip hop.
Big part of hip hop selling confidence. So that's
now I'm wondering when you. Like the way you phrase that, I mean, I get the impression that that's something that you are actively sort of trying to move. I've heard, I can't remember the name of one of your tracks. I heard it a while ago, and it seemed to be talking about like self-confidence and that kind of stuff. And I know, like I'm not really from the hip hop world, so I'm not very educated on it. But I know, for example, what's his name? Is it he's another East Coaster. Is it DJ Stinkin' Rich, or he goes? I think he has two things. He's a guy from Halifax, and he's got this album out, and it's hip hop. He's got one that's like about having the munchies, and he's got another one that's like very philosophical. It's about like as if gods were among us, they would walk like giants. Comparing us to like
that's kind of cool.
how
like
we
that.
see ants or something, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I am. I'm going to go out on a branch and assume that there is plenty of that in hip hop, but it's not getting the mainstream.
No,
right? It's not the let's say the majority. But I think that that exists. But from what I've seen from interviews with some hip hop artists and stuff, I've heard some of them talk about there being. With some of the famous ones, pressure from the record company to say, and especially, I mean, we're both white guys, but, I've read some interviews where, the people that are black, and then sometimes the companies are owned by white people, and they're like, we can market this, gangster kind of.
Yeah, they want them to stay in a certain lane, maybe.
Image, the same way like black artists sometimes, it's like, the roles they're getting offered in movies is, they gotta do like the Ebonics shit talk, but they might be like from Brampton, you know what I mean, and they might not have grown up, kind of in that culture, but there's a pressure to maybe conform. So like, do you ever feel like? I mean, obviously, like me, you're a white guy, but do you ever feel like a pressure to, because when you're working in that genre? To if I do this, maybe I will get more airplay or something.
For sure. There's definitely, and I would say for almost any genre, there's like obviously like, you know, a set of rules or whatever you're playing in, or certain, you know what I mean? Like the kind of the chord everybody's in is roughly the same. Like, you know what I mean? You're not going to hear like a lot of country music, guitar twang on a hip hop track. Just in general, I mean, there's exceptions. But you know what I mean? Like you're going to, I'm working on hip hop, so I'm probably going to be using old school drum samples or electronic. You know what I mean? Like there's kind of categories or whatever you want to say, or like formulas. And I like to kind of take other genres and put them into that sometimes and interject it. And a big part of it is lyrically, I like to focus on more introspective themes or what I consider larger concepts, because a lot of hip hop is, and like I said, I'm speaking from the Canadian hip hop angle. I'm not going to speak about American hip hop, which is much different. You know what I mean? Canadian hip hop is almost an offshoot, I would say. Very white, male dominated part of the industry in Canada. You know what I mean? Classified as the biggest East Coast rapper. Almost all East Coast rappers are, it's a lot of white guys. So obviously I can only speak for myself and the experiences I've had. I don't want to try and speak for anybody else on that level. But in general, in my experience, there's a lot of what I would call machismo, shallow braggadocio writing, which is like, I'm the best for no other reason than that I'm the best. I'm rapping, therefore I'm the best rapper, which is fine, and that's like I said, playing the rules of the game. That's like playing basketball for playing basketball.
Isn't it also to some extent part of the in sometimes like part of the culture of the skill, right? To like if you're talking about the guys that are doing freestyling, to be able to come up with that sort of diss track in the moment,
that's
like
right.
where it's like it's
that's
like
a different thing.
You know, it's like the. I'm sure we're showing our like Canadian whiteness now. I don't know if you're a hockey fan. I'm not a big one, but I'm not a big one. But I do, watch it sometimes. And it's, I've seen the documentary called The Code, and it's about fighting in hockey. Right. And like 98% of the times, the guys aren't pissed off at each other. Right. It's like it's a role, and they actually talk to each other and say like, look, like it's usually a very calm conversation, can we go later because I got to do this for me. So they almost help each other out. Like they'll say, I realize you got to do this. Right. Obviously, sometimes there's bad blood.
Yeah. There's a culture thing. Yeah. For sure.
I get the sense that like part of that with the culture. Could be the same thing, right? It's like if I did a drum battle with somebody, maybe I'd try to play better, but like I would still respect them,
100%.
Right? And if maybe that's part of the, part of like a particular skill that is a big part of hip hop is being able to, sort of like. Like so, and I think with anything, like, do you think that there's are there positive aspects to it, and are there negative aspects to it, and are there sometimes it's that balance? Like some people do it in a a playful way, other people get too personal or something.
I think it's a bit of both for sure. Especially with like the rap, like you said, with the improvised on the spot freestyling and stuff. Nobody's expecting you to come up with something maybe super deep or philosophical in that moment. They expect it to be snappy and funny and witty, almost like a stand-up comedian roasting somebody. You know what I mean? Almost like it's almost like a different part of the art. And there is and on the spot in the moment, it's very hard to be very critical of the lyrics they come up with, right? Because like one of the I almost
it's what rhymes and comes right now.
Exactly, right? And that can sometimes go against you very like I've seen some guys freestyle on stage and say some things that almost got them canceled. You know what I mean? Like I've seen like some stuff comes out once in a while.
Ropa-dopa, we got a new popa, right? Because something topical that's in your mind. You saw it on the news yesterday, right?
100%,
and if I had done that and were like overly critical of the Pope, in that moment, I wouldn't have had time to.
No, you don't want to think.
That's my first time ever, I guess, trying to like freestyle
live on air.
Do you want to give me like a 2 out of 10? Or?
I actually had a buddy one time. He doesn't do any he does drumming. Actually, he's a drummer, so I shouldn't say he doesn't do any music. He does drumming. But he one time we were on a chat online and he started freestyling just to make fun of me as it's like teasing me, and he actually legitimately dissed me pretty good to the point where to this day we're like, hey, remember that time you just like off the top roasted the crap out of me freestyling? It's really funny. But I try not to. For me in general, and this is just like a me thing, I'm not huge on the battle rap part of the culture. Because in general, for me, I like to collaborate, and there is like a collaboration in a sense where you're competing with somebody. Like you're not like working together, but we're both building off each other, and there's also like that sense of competition can elevate each other, which is good too.
Absolutely.
And so there is something like positive from that. And also even in the lyric sense, because I've gone on about hip hop lyrics bugging me before in the past. And I don't want to be like the old dude who's like, these kids should be talking about this. In general, what I try and avoid is like blatantly sexist lyrics.
Yes.
Because I personally disagree with that. I think like I love all human beings, and I mean, look, I'm a straight white guy. I love women. So for me, going and talking disrespectfully about women, especially ones I'm attracted to or interested in, which is what a lot of rappers are talking about in their music, it bugs me to be like, why would you refer to her as XYZ when you are attracted to her and want her to like you? You know what I mean? Like I just go like,
and even the thing, like you say, if you're not interested, you still want to have respect for people,
you still want to be nice to people.
So it's like it's that like that. Do we forget to treat people with a basic
level of respect,
level of human respect? And I think some of that is partly with the culture of just the social media and internet. Half the time it's not your real name.
That's right.
And the person's not right in front of you to punch.
That's right.
To punch you in the face if you go too far. Right.
Immediate repercussions. That's right.
They're going to have to get in an airplane and fly to somewhere else, and by that time they might have cooled down enough.
Hopefully, hopefully. And I do think there's also room. Like,
so I just got the. It's not like that guy that was like. I'm sorry. You see the guy, the guy is he's sitting behind Mike Tyson in the plane. He's bugging him and saying, blah, 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 and then like Mike he turns around and punches him.
I haven't seen that. It must have been a while ago. I feel like I do remember this. But I don't
it was like because if it's immediate, the person there's
talk shit, get hit. They say that's right. People in reality, people know that, and that's one of those things with the rap battles that it's what's cool about the culture of rap battles. Actually, I'm sure this has happened, but I've never seen a rap battle that devolved into violence where they're like angry at each other in that sense. Definitely competitive rivalry and fires, but for the most part, I do think there's a mutual respect. And I also want to like make sure I mention too, because like I said, like the braggadocio lyrics and the machismo and stuff, there's room for that, and that it is fun. Like some of my favorite songs that I've done, I literally hit up a friend because I heard a cool beat and went like, want to talk some shit on this, and we'll just have some fun on this. You know what I mean? Like there's a sense of like attitude that you take on in hip hop, which you said it's a self-confidence thing, and it's like a build yourself up thing, and it's a me and the crew thing. A lot of times it's young men that like hip hop, and a lot of times young men want to get together, they want to party, they want to feel good, they want to have that like the hunting mindset that men have together. You know what I mean? That kind of like we're going out, we're together, we're a squad, we're whatever. There's a lot of that like exactly. Well, there's like a companionship, a brethren thing that goes on, and you hear that in the music a lot too. Me and the gang, me and the crew, all that kind of stuff, right? And there's room for, like I said, fun. So for me, like you'll hear me have songs where I'm bragging in the lyrics. Doesn't mean that I believe all of it. It's fun, and we're taking on an attitude.
And I think like when you have a good relationship with somebody, like I know I'm hanging around with guy friends, like we'll shit talk each other, but we know it's not serious.
That's right.
Like we'll say something like, oh, you're an idiot, man. But we know we're not.
It's not meaningful.
A lot of stuff is like context and tone of voice. It's like
100%.
Like for me, like so. I'm not. I'm not a hip hop guy really, but I've sometimes thought of I like these reaction videos where it's like hip hop guy listens to like old rock,
right,
and I was thinking like I could do that, and then I could be like hip hop, like tell me the things like what should I be listening to that's more than like the 3-minute blurb that happened to pass by my ear when I was walking by a radio somewhere, So
you can do those,
but I am a poet, right? So
I was going to say you're not far off.
So I do, I do, and I do sometimes improvise. I have improvised poetry. It's going to be in a very different meter. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and even like I don't even, the style that I do with poetry is more. It probably sounds more like the old like hippie thing, it's not even like the slam poetry, which is getting very close to hip hop. I think in terms of the meter and the cadence and the stuff.
I would say there's a huge crossover Venn diagram of freestyle and poetry in general. It's actually one of the funniest things to me about hip hop culture is that it takes itself so seriously. And at the end of the day, all these beefs that these guys talk about, it's literally two dudes in different rooms writing about each other. And I'm like, okay, you're literally just writing poetry angrily at each other, and you're going to act like this is a tough guy sport thing. You know what I mean? And it's actually really, in a lot of ways, the opposite. It's a very sensitive. I'm going to write an angry poem about this guy, and when he hears it, he's going to be pissed. Like, are you kidding me? There's nothing super tough guy about that, right?
But it isn't like to a certain extent. Like I mean, I totally respect your say that there are certain things that I personally don't want to do.
100%. Because, that's just a choice thing.
Because that's something I feel important. But I, there's and this isn't one of our one of our things, but like I think with any art form, like when I'm performing, no matter what I'm doing, there's a certain level of authenticity, but there's also a certain level of there's a modified version of me. There's the
larger than life version. That's what I call it. The crank it up to 11 or stage presence version of you, right?
Either that, or sometimes it's just I'm tapping on a particular because sometimes with poetry it might not be larger than life, but it might be. True. I'm tapping into a particular subsection of my personality, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's okay, to have your. Cause at the end of the day, right? Like each person needs to make. Would you say like a choice between what is their comfortable level of between me, the guy when the camera's not on or I'm not on the stage, and me. Because some people they're, because it can be part of the business to craft a persona is very. It can be a good business decision.
That's what they're selling. Yeah, a lot of times they're selling a personality or an image or a lifestyle or an attitude. I mean, a big thing is, and I've said this already, hip hop is a lot of times it's selling confidence or self-ownership or some level of like, you know what I mean? Because a lot of times these are solo artists too. There's not a lot of bands or groups in hip hop in general. At least like you said on the mainstream kind of big level, right? It's usually almost always solo artists at this point in hip hop. And so a big part of it is selling yourself, the image of you, because like I said, it's not just the music at that point when it's like kind of a solitary figure. When it's a band, there's almost like a, you know what I mean? There's like I don't know, it's a lot, I should say. When there's a band, it's like the image can be adapted differently. When you're a solo artist, it's a lot of people are looking at you and your face. And they have to relate to you in some way, whether it's, you know what I mean? So it doesn't mean they have to look like you or whatever, or sound like you, but they have to, whatever you're saying to them and the images and visuals you're portraying in your music or whatever, those have to somehow tap into a part of their personality too. So,
and I guess coming back to like the, the mental health aspect of it, like have you, how much, has that been a big pressure or stressor for you, or are you fairly comfortable with it, and has it always been that way, or?
It's definitely been like a period where I've had to get used to it, even in a small sense of like things like people knowing me as the guy who does the rap music, or like, you know what I mean? Like sometimes, and I'm not like popular, I'm not very well known, but in Charlottetown, once in a while, you get recognized because
it's a small town, and you're trying to make your thing, and I feel the same thing. I'm putting posters up. I'm doing like Instagram stuff because it's like it seems what you got to do these days, right? Like even
get yourself out there. That's right.
I am pretty much sure that I have, like a social media, like internet addiction, right? And it's difficult to balance that because I can't stop if I want to do this. So things like that are tricky. Let's talk a little bit about the work overload versus work underload, and how that sort of impacts your space as a human being with emotions and things and.
I've experienced a lot of issues with overload in particular, like burning myself out. And this is something that I think is, especially these days, like you said, with social media, I think it's super common for artists because you get that like dopamine rush that social media fucking gives you, and then you know what I mean. Then you're burnt out, and then your brain's just not firing the same, or you're always refreshing to try and see notifications, and it just ends up creating these weird loops that are not good, where you're looking at other people's reels and comparing yourself, and how come his reel got 2,000 views and mine got 800, and how come he gets so much reach or he's got more followers? But there's so many like. In general, they say comparison's the thief of joy, right? And social media is built to compare you or to try, you know what I mean?
I love that that comparison.
Oh yeah, I don't remember who said it. I heard it on another podcast, and and that person was quoting someone else. You know what I mean? So it could be, you know, who knows?
Google probably.
Yeah, hopefully it wasn't like hopefully it was somebody good that said that quote, not like, you know what I mean? But
Google knows and AI knows.
Yeah, exactly.
My guitar player actually did one said picked up the AI, which I guess is now Google, and said,
pretty much,
who is like. What are like Trevor Lowell Clements and the Bar and Cut Poetry Beat, and it came up with a bunch of shit stuff, and I'm like, I've done like 5 shows. You know what I mean?
It doesn't take much to aggregate as long as you type in the right shit.
So
100%. And I've dealt with that a little bit too, where like I have a Google, like, if you type my name into Google or whatever, if you type Braedon V in, there's like a page that shows up or whatever, and it'll have like older photos of me or whatever.
Yes.
And even those, I go like, oh man, like, why is that photo the one that's, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, why does it have to be that photo? Like, so even those things, like, there's a self-image thing that has to happen once you put anything out there on the internet, right? And this is something for anybody, not just artists. Like you said, you put it out there, it's out there, and it'll show up in places you don't expect. That's right. So like one thing, like, you know what I mean, I did one time was like I searched myself and I went through my backlog history and found like websites that I'd been signed up to for years and stuff. And you show up in those eventually. And I remember I had a blog that I'd posted when I was like 16 or something, and I was like, I found that randomly once because I was just searching backlog internet searches of myself basically, just to see what's out there. You know what I mean? And because you never look. Sometimes people say some mean things on the internet, and sometimes you want to find out.
Yep. And our generation. I mean, I'm guessing you're a little younger than me, but like our generation doesn't have the benefit. Like when I grew up in the 70s, none of this crap was preserved for people to see later.
Yeah, that's right. It wasn't even a thought. That's right.
I could make a stupid mistake when I was 15, and it's not going to come back when I'm 40. No, that's right. And somebody's going to say that guy is like a worthless human being because he made this bad judgment once, right? It's like.
There's no room for growth on the internet.
You're very quick to be judged on the internet, so I can see how you're going to be
you kind of have to
self-conscious about your image, right? Because you do have to some extent
go through your old tweets, people.
Balance.
Scroll through your old tweets, just for everybody out there, because you never know. I don't know why.
I never read Twitter, but
well, that's because you're smart. I don't know. You see it every once in a while. You see like artists or whoever it is slammed for old tweets that resurface, and I'm like, here's the thing. If it was more than 15 years ago or 10 years ago on the internet that somebody posted some stupid comment, because I'm sure I've done this too. A lot of people have, and they whether they want to admit it or not. But it's like, if that, like you said, you grew up in a time when the internet wasn't even a thing. I grew up in a time when the internet was for memes and downloading music illegally, and like, you know what I mean? Nothing was taken seriously. There was no people going and checking your internet, what you were doing on Facebook before they hired you. There was none of that. Now that's a thing. I remember when I don't know, when I was 19 or something, like we'd take some photos at the party and we post them on Facebook. A couple of years later, friends hit me up, hey, we got to take these photos down. You know what I mean? Like, and nothing crazy in the photos. You're holding a beer. You know what I mean? It's not like we're like doing hard drugs or, nothing crazy at all. But just that is enough these days sometimes to get you into trouble. Because like you, I do these things, and I don't really plan to ever necessarily make a living out of it. I've done my master's. I'm going into counseling. Music, I still want to do it. I'd love for it to be a secondary stream of income someday, maybe. Of course. I don't know if you've managed to monetize your I make some money.
Podcast or anything or whatever.
Not off podcast. But I make money off live shows.
But I haven't really. But and unemployed now, but the counseling, I have a passion for that, and the mental health, I have a passion. So I'll be happy to to do that as a job, and then if the music brings some money in, that's awesome. If it doesn't, I'm not going to have this like necessarily.
Right, like existential crisis maybe or something, right?
I mean, now because I'm unemployed, yes, but in terms of like if I'm looking long range of my long range plans. Don't count on me depending on music. Like I still want to do it. But what about you? Like do you do you have a second job? Would you like to do this as your only career?
Sure would. So I have what I would call a long-term goal, which is essentially I'm actually I'm hoping to go back to college. I'm on a wait list right now, so we'll see if I get accepted. But I'm hoping to go back to school just so I can get a better paying job essentially. And that will fund. And the job that I'm, without getting into details and breaking down all the courses and certifications I need to get where I want to go. I'm trying to work in healthcare in a job that will give me a flexible schedule. And it will make me enough money in those hours I do put in that it will help me fund my music so I can promote it the way I feel like it deserves to be promoted. Because the biggest issue I've had with my whole career is lack of budgeting or lack of funding for marketing. Because I'm a dumbass, I spend all my money on production, visual content, pretty much everything except for once it's released, let's make sure people see it.
But you know what?
So I gotta work on that.
Like to be the devil's advocate. If you've spent that money on the production, you could re-promote it.
100%. That's right.
You could, you hear that of bands that like get big, and then they have this album that they did in the past that sold 40 copies. and they re-release it now that they have the platform. So, but I get you, like, you know, like for example, like before I come in here, I was putting posters up. Like how much. Like, how many posters do you put up for a show?
Oh, man. Actually, it was really frustrating so a couple shows ago, I think this was last summer, I did a show, and I did 2 runs of posters, and they got torn down within a week both times.
Oh, wow.
So I was, like, really... I mean, like, I get there's a lot of shows, people need space for posters or whatever.
But you paid for it.
Yeah, I paid for those posters, and it sucks because it almost felt like it was targeted. Like, I felt like somebody went around and ripped them all off with it. Because I swear it was like 4 days after I put them up, they were all torn down. I drove around downtown and was like, where the hell are all my posters? Yeah. So I went and got another run done. And after that, I was like, you know what, maybe I won't do posters for my next show. And then just the last show I did in April, I decided I'd do posters again, another poster run. And I was having issues with the poster graphic coming out. I had this photo of myself. The first run of posters, the photos came out color weird. You know what I mean? It just didn't look the way I thought it would. So I had to do actually 2 prints before I got the right version, and then I printed multiples of that. Anyways, it didn't cost that much more. But usually, most shows, I spend $30 to $40 on posters, 30 to 50. But that's also, I do my own graphic design, though. Other people that don't do their own graphic design, they're paying $50 just to get the graphic.
Exactly.
And then they're paying to print it, and they put out X amount of posters. Usually, I do like 20 posters. I don't go crazy with it. But to be fair, a lot of people get extra posters and then they sell them for like $1 or $2 at the show and sell them and like sign them or whatever. I haven't done it. I've heard people saying like, "Hey, if you're trying to find a way to get a couple extra bucks."
I think I'd have to get like a following.
Yeah, fair enough, right? Yeah, fair enough. Me too. I feel you.
I'd have to get to the point where where people were willing to buy a poster. But hey, it's a neat idea. I do keep. I usually try to keep a copy of my own posters just for nostalgia. Yeah. And I started doing something. Is very, very tiny in the bottom. I put the year.
Nice.
Because I've got all these posters from like the 90s and stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, it'll say Friday, August 25th. And I'm like,
what year? Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
When the hell was that? You know what I mean?
No, that's true. Yeah.
So that's something I started doing just for my own personal...
Yep. And for SoCan royalties, like they want proof that you've got these shows. Posters is one of the best sources that they can use. Like they say, if you can submit a bunch of posters, you can get paid for live shows that way.
I haven't I have to go and I mean the songs from my first album I registered with SoCan and I've been sort of spinning my wheels to like release. I've got enough like stuff recorded and done for like 3 albums, but it's just about that much. But just to sometimes that stuff feels ominous just to get it done.
Sure does. Oh yeah.
And if I ever was in a place where, you get to a certain level where it seems like the music industry is not really like that anymore, except for really big artists, where you have like a team, people to do the business stuff, and you just, you want to, because if I'm going to be doing the counseling, mostly, I've worked in the school system and I'm super burned out on that. If I, let's say, get a school counseling job, and then I have that 2 months in the summer.
Right.
If I had a manager, I could say, look, I'll be here from these dates and these dates. Yeah. You make me busy and I'll show up. Yeah. Right? But that stuff is so, like, you got other stuff going on in your life, and it can be just one more thing to get, like you said, overwork, to get sucked in. Yeah. And it can feel like a black hole sometimes.
Sure. Oh yeah, I mean, even like you said, like it feels ominous. Every time I release a new single, that means I got to do 15 probably graphics, right? I got to do the artwork. I got to do Facebook profile photo with you know what I mean? Like you got to do the banner. You got to do the out now. You got to do there's all kinds of graphics and visuals and editing you have to do just to do a release of a single, much less an album. My goodness, when I was last year, I was going like, I'm gonna just release a whole album and have everything ready before I even start putting it out. And let me tell you, that was a nightmare to try and do. And I mean, I've got, like you were just saying, you've got a couple albums ready. I've got an album ready. It's almost ready, I should say. I could release it. It's just I don't want to until I've got, like I said, all the other infrastructure ready. But it's, there's a lot to it, and it's when you think of all the stuff, I have a to-do list on my computer, and it's a scroll bar now, and I just scroll down and I go,
You're probably going to need a new hard drive.
So much stuff. Yeah, there's just so many things, and it just gets more and more and more.
If you put your to-do list on it.
Yeah, and for me, too, like, for anybody who's, time is always the problem. There's never enough time. Life is full of distractions, and I get home after like everything I've done I have X amount of responsibilities over the day, and then I have X amount of free time. What I say is I've got a 9 to 5 and then a 6 to 9, basically.
Yeah.
Right. But the joke is, it's not really 6 to 9 for me. It's more like a 7 to 12:30 because I'm, and I mean, you can see it on like the last 5 years. I do not sleep enough because every night I've got an hour or two I have to do work. Now, to be fair, I take days off, and I've been a little lazy, especially more lately. After a show, I usually take a week or two or chill or whatever. You know what I mean? It's definitely good to take breaks. But overwork, like you.
Yeah. That was one of those things you said before, like coping mechanisms, right? Is knowing that you have to build that in, right? Because like you tell me what happens if you don't build it in.
Oh man, let me tell you. Yeah, so if you don't schedule, like, give yourself time off or time to like recoup or refill your creative well or whatever you want to call it. First of all, you end up like, it affects your writing, it affects everything you do, because if you don't want to do it, you're not going to be passionate, and it's going to kill your love. Like, that's the main thing. So the reason I started making music, I felt like I had like a reason. Like, I felt like I was called to it. And then after 2-3 years of it and dealing with all the politics and the money and this and that, rejection and social media, all the shit, right? I almost forgot why I'd started. Yep. Like, you know what I mean? And you have to remind yourself of that stuff when you're struggling, because all that other crap, all the social media, all the work that you didn't want to do that you have to do to be able to just do the thing that you want to do, all that stuff is worth it in ways, as long as you, like I said, you got to pace yourself though, and you have to do it in a way that's feasible for you and sustainable for you. Otherwise, like I said, I took a year almost from posting on social media. I literally took a very large break from social media because it was killing me. Every single day I was editing for over an hour. On lunch breaks at work, I'd be editing on my phone. Any minute I had of free time, I was editing videos so I could post reels. And ultimately what I've found is, and they'll try and tell you, post every day. I
heard that, yeah.
Yeah, well, you can post every day if you want. What I have found, and this is also personal, I'm not super successful, so maybe I'm wrong, but I found that posting every day, the level of your quality of content goes down. You start looking spammy, and people feel like there's lack of effort, and you don't want to do it anyway. So it's like, I would rather post once a week, once every 2 weeks, and have it feel meaningful and have it be something that I feel like people will pay attention to and react to.
Do you think it's just like the same kind of thing that musicians have all, to a certain extent, musicians have always had to deal with this, but now social media is a new...
It's like a new aspect.
Like a new, how can I say... a new lane that has been added to that highway. Whereas, like... so if you're not making enough money from, like, like, let's say you manage to, like, somebody like Rick Beato, right, who does, is everything music, and he's, I'd say he's making enough money from that it makes sense to do it every day. Right? Once you get to a certain point of monetary coming back, and it's funny, when you say the work overload versus work underload, at least I think, like, artists that are sort of in the stage that we are, where we're not like, we haven't blown up. We're not like necessarily making all of our money from money. Is that like, it's funny how, like, the work overload part tends to be the part that's not being paid, and the work underload part tends to be the part where you go to a gig and you might get some money coming back.
That's a good point. A lot of time is spent on things that don't feel like they have a return. That's right. But people insist they do. They'll say, go on social media every day, you might go viral, you might blow up, people discover you that way. And it's true, like, there is a, like, incremental, like, if you post every day, say I post a clip of one song of mine every day, 15-second snippet or whatever on TikTok with a different visual every single day, and let's say each one gets 300 to 500 views, because it seems like most people in general, when they post on TikTok, they get a couple hundred views and then it falls off, right? Algorithmically. So, like, I tried for a year to do that, and I gained a couple thousand followers. Most of them don't interact with all the shit, though. So it's
they come to the shows? Does it? Well, I guess that's the thing, right? When
where's the translation, right?
I did. Did you do that? You probably did it too, because you're a music PE, I remember, right? Like, so you probably did the Taking Care of Business course.
Yeah, I did the older version of it. They have a different version. Actually, I sat through both. No, you're right.
You were in this one, right? So, like, where it's like. I can't remember. Like, I'm sure they probably said something where, like, I feel like one of the facilitators in this one had said something like, like, when you're making these decisions, because people, and this is something that I take from the counseling, is you got to sometimes analyze the words you're saying. Like, when I say I have to, and then say, well, no. do I have to? Will I, will I start, like we put those things on ourselves, or the word should. I should. And I used to have a person said, and I want a t-shirt says stop shoulding on yourself, right?
That's funny, yeah.
Is that like, maybe you look like which ones maybe seem to have paid off, and then put more energy into that one. Like I think you...
Yeah, finding what works and doubling down on it's big, and eliminating some of that extra stuff that's maybe taking more time than it should with no return.
And then the thing is too is I think you gotta, like, because that's my approach too. You said you want to go back to college and you want to get a job that gives you a bit more financial independence. So that you're not freaking out. Oh crap! I'm not gonna get enough people at the show and my rent's due.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, and then you can maybe
that's right.
Breathe and enjoy it a little more, because you say, when you said you forgot why you did it, right? And that can be easy to do. And I think myself, right, like I'm 52, so a lot of times, things blowing up happens for younger people, right?
For sure.
Not that it doesn't.
I feel too old too. Don't worry about that. That's the music industry for you. There's like a...
it does. Some people do. Something can go... can go big later in the career, but the way I kind of look at the social media, and I guess to the music to an extent too, is that although there's something drives me, I need to do it. I've lost that thing that I had when I was younger, where I felt like I need to necessarily make a career out of it, or I need to get this successful at it to be kind of happy, with it, like so I'm to that point where I'm able to make choices where I want to do what makes me feel, reasonably happy, and then after that find a balance. So I do a bit of the social media, but not even close to every day, not even close to every week, right? And I thought, like, but if one of those, like if I do something and it blows up and it makes, and it gets like 10 million views,
career can be made.
Then I can start monetizing that, and then I can say, okay, here is a time when maybe it makes sense for me to start doing more, right? Because now I'm, so that's kind of how I look at it. I'm trying to tell myself not to listen to the shoulds that people say, or the have to, kind of language, because I don't have to.
No, that's right.
I would like to, have more people know what I'm doing, and I would like to be able to build it to a point where I can do a show and know that I could get this many people, and that I could break even or something, or or hire somebody to do this and know that I would be able to make enough to to get it back. But
a lot of it's a chicken and egg situation too.
Exactly.
I mean, it's like you're, a lot of these people that they blew up because they were posting every day, but they also had the time and energy to post every single day.
Yes.
And maybe they're more a social media oriented person. Like, there's,
and if they're a teenager living with their parents,
they've got no bills,
they don't have financial commitments, 100%.
Right? Yeah, or even time commitments too, right? As you get
older, or family commitments. If you got I have no kids, but I have a wife. So what I do impacts her life, directly, right? And that's sometimes a you are too obsessed with music and it's not making money, right? So that can be a. What about you? Do you have like family issues that come into it with?
Well, I'm actually pretty lucky. My dad is he was never like able to be a full-time musician, but he's a multi-instrumentalist, a producer himself. I grew up with him like playing music in his music room while I was falling asleep, basically, so piano and stuff. So, and he's a very good guitarist. So he's multi-talented guy, more talented than I am musically. So he's totally like pretty much gung-ho for it. And my mom is, while she's not as a musical person, she's very like understanding of like, she understands how like
do what makes you happy, and it's not necessarily whether you get rich at it.
Yeah, I think she's probably realized by now, especially, that I'm probably not going to be like the scientist who cures cancer or whatever. You know what I mean? Like whatever maybe hopes she'd had for her kid when I was in the womb. Those are probably the realistic. At some point you go, okay, maybe he's like he's become something else than maybe what I'd imagine. So I think she's understood like, oh, okay, he likes this music thing kind of like his dad, but he's maybe a bit more because my dad I think was maybe a bit more obsessive than I am always. I'm very obsessive too. but I think it's a bit more like of a healthy obsession, where I think my dad is almost he almost gets like too into the weeds. You know what I mean? Like he's fine sitting in his own studio with no outside world interference at all, I think sometimes. And I think that can become unhealthy in itself too.
So you were kind of lucky you didn't have that too much. There's a line, an old AC/DC song, Bon Scott, like the original singer, is like, they wanted me to be respected as a doctor or a lawyer, man.
Right. Yeah.
What was that? But I had the devil in my ears telling me what to do. No. They wanted me to be respected as a doctor or a lawyer, man. But I had other plans.
Right.
I got the devil in my ear telling me what to do, and I'm all ears. Right. You know what I mean? But you didn't have to fight with your family, like they're supportive.
Yeah, there was never you'll never make money if you pursue this or whatever. Like there was there was definitely like conversations like, look, you have to be realistic about your expectations, and I think I think every artist needs to have that at some point and go like, whatever artist you aspire to be, or whoever, like when you imagine what you wish your career could be, whatever level that is, whatever artist that meets that, you know what I mean?
It's
like
part
Taylor
of growing
Swift,
up, isn't it?
Well, yeah, that's right. Like everybody,
even if you're not an artist, right? Like
there's only not. What is it, the way they put it? Like, not too many people get to be Michael Jordan, you know what I mean? Michael Jordan gets to be Michael Jordan.
Yes.
And everybody else gets to try and aspire to be, you know what I mean? Whatever. You know what I mean? And maybe that's, like, not fair, to compare people in that level, because I think art is also a different thing. Like, when I make a song, it doesn't have the same intention or purpose as when Taylor Swift makes a song, or as when even or as when you make a song, or as when Taylor Swift or Drake or whoever the fuck makes a song. Like there's different things in mind that they're trying to do with it. Maybe there's a certain mood or sound or style they're reaching for. Maybe they want it to be a hit song. Maybe they don't. Maybe they don't care about that. So for me, it's like the intent behind the creation of the song is important. So because, like I said, like if I don't make some of my deep introspective hip hop songs expecting people to sing along to them at the shows. Yeah. I expect people to maybe hear them and go like, oh, there's maybe something I can relate to there or whatever. Or maybe I want them to feel a certain way.
You want like maybe like the person's going to sit down and say, like preach reality kind of thing, as opposed to like make me shake my ass.
Exactly,
and there's nothing wrong with that.
That's right, there's both.
Right. And as you said, you had one track where kind of for fun, you and your friend were dissing, like, you could maybe you will have a some of your tracks are a little maybe more fun, and then some are more introspective, right? And
but people are complex, so I think people need to, as consumers of music, we have to understand that when we hear artists' music too, like, oh, maybe they're in a playful mood when they made this song, maybe they were in a very serious place when they made this song, maybe they were grieving when they made this song, and maybe that's why it is the way it is. And maybe it might be none of those things. Maybe they just wanted to make a really fun poppy summery song one day. And you know what I mean? Like I've got all these goals of things like that myself. Like I always wanted to do a really deep, like a cool techno-y, dancey song. Yes. And I just really recently was able to do one because I've finally gotten good enough at Ableton that I'm able to produce dance music to a level that I feel like is at least close enough to what I could release, you know what I mean? Yeah. And once I did that, it felt so cool. I was like sharing the demo to people going like, this isn't even done yet, but I'm super excited about it because I wanted to be able to do this for years. And so there's like, we obviously have to like manage our expectations in terms of what happens once we've released the music. But what we can control, we have to focus on, and then just focus on making that as good as it can and making sure we're proud of that. Because after that, after it's out there, it is no longer in our hands. And like I said, there's nothing more frustrating than listening to my old music and knowing what I could have done better on it. Or, you know what I mean? There's always different. You can always make it different. But my thing, especially with music production, is if we're going to change or add something to the song, will it improve it?
Does that cut less with like time and more to say that I could have done better, but that was part of my journey.
There's always that for sure. There's also times where I know I cheaped out, or I was maybe trying to rush, or I was maybe just didn't put in the work that I could have in certain segments, or like, you know what I mean. There's always like factors you could include for sure to like justify or give yourself reasons or whatever too. And like a lot of people when they listen to music, they won't even hear that shit that I'm hearing. You know what I mean? Like they're just hearing the song for what it is. I hear it for the. Like, you know what I mean? You kind of like deconstruct it yourself. Like when I listen to my own music, I know the whole process that went into making it from the very first part where I first came up with the first line of the chorus and went, oh man, this is cool. Let me see what I can get from this, and then expand it on. Other people, they just hear the finished project as it is, and they go like, this is just what it is. For me, I go like, well, there was a line there that I could have put in that I liked more, or I had to cut out X, Y, Z, or I had to adjust this, or you know what I mean? So there's always that. And I think one of the things I love about producing though in music is taking is post-production, which is when the song is as close to done as possible, the tweaks we can make and the little touches and those little things to make it tighter and better and cooler or whatever it is.
So do you master all your own stuff, or do you get somebody?
So I work with people for mastering. In general, an artist, Spivvy, local guy, he masters a lot of my music. I've also worked with other producers, Adam Gallant locally. He's mastered some of my stuff. And I have mastered some of my own stuff. I really, when I first started music, I was big on the idea of like, I should be going into a lab and coming out with gold, and everybody should praise it. Look at this beautiful thing I created.
Of course they should.
And then, but then the more I got into music creation and collaborating and working with smarter people than me in particular in studios.
The whole world is stupid, and they don't realize
it's
revolving around me.
That's right. You guys should see this thing I made.
Him, not me.
Yeah, exactly. This thing is super valuable, and everybody needs to realize it. But like, I used to think that was like the way music was made. It was like you go into the mine and you come out with the diamond, and everybody praises it. Instead, what I realized is it's like, what I like at least more is working on something with people, and then it comes out and it's not just mine, and that's what I love about it. My favorite songs are my collabs where I had another artist in, because it's not just mine anymore, and there's like maybe something less like, I want to say like masturbatory about it, but like there's something about like listening to your own music that can be a little masturbatory, I feel like, you know what I mean, or whatever that is, you know what I mean. So
you know what else can be very masturbatory?
What?
Masturbating.
Yeah, sure can be.
And then not everything that's masturbatory is 100% bad.
Well, that's right.
I'm just saying.
Well, 100%. That's true. I mean, even the idea of shaming masturbation is silly in a way too, right? Like, it's a very normal thing. But for me, I've really taken the most joy out of songs where I've worked with other people and been able to be like, look at the work we put together, and they can be proud of it, I hope, too, because that's where I take the pride.
It brings it to different places too, right?
Yeah,
because sometimes you have, we should do a collaboration. And I was thinking, I don't know what that would look like. Maybe it would be, it would be some poetry on one of your tracks, right? Or something, and instead of another hip hop or something. I don't know if it would. I don't know if poetry would. I don't know if hip hop would fit within my context. But you never know. Maybe it would. Or
hip hop is just poetry with attitude. Really, it's just like, you know what I mean. You phrase some things different. And you know what I mean.
Although
Rhythm.
I will say, I do. Now I haven't written it myself. But I do sort of a funk, rap, hip hop version of Bud the Spud.
There you go. Right.
So there could be a place in that for
that's cool
for a hip hop artist to like, come on and if maybe it would require me recording another version that had enough empty space, or something or something very short. Yeah. But
that's cool.
I think I like what you said though about that, like that. And every artist is different, like in terms of their threshold for how much of a perfectionist they are. And I think there's a happy medium. I've heard some artists that really had a hard time saying, like, at some point you just have to say it's done.
Yep, 100%.
Right?
Yep, I've had that. I've struggled with that a lot.
And sometimes that nitpicking can make it worse, because sometimes it gets overproduced and it takes out the...
Yeah, whatever the heart was,
or
whatever the soul,
or something, right?
I've ruined some songs myself. Trust me. Yeah, ruined some of my better songs.
And I've got the thing where, because like I like improvising, and I'm very what's that word when you do things just without thinking?
I don't know. I want to say reckless, but maybe reckless, just like in the spot though. With music, it's a bit more like improvised. And like
what's
on
the word
spot,
when you do? You do things and you can't really stop you. What's the word there? An English teacher for years, and I got the vocabulary.
Like impulsively.
Impulsive.
Like,
yeah, I can be very impulsive, and I'm also comfortable. Like personally, like I can go on stage and do, like I did a while back. I played at Banu and then they wanted something for the next night, and I came in. I couldn't get my band, so I brought some drums and a looper pedal, and it sucked. And I didn't take it. I mean, some of it was okay, just when I was kind of playing, but I had a looper pedal I borrowed. It didn't work the way I thought it was going to work, and it wasn't good. But I don't, and also with the music, I actually like a certain amount of imperfection because there's a personality in it, but there's too much imperfection. And
getting like a half medium too. That's
getting to your point, I've had other people that I've played with that have brought the other voice and say, well, let's just refine it a little more. And I think with collaborations, we balance each other out. I don't play Like you said, your father's a multi-instrumentalist, so if you wanted probably any instrument on your thing, you could say, Dad, I need this, and he'd do it for you, right?
Yeah, we're going to get him on a guitar solo soon.
And I don't know if you play any instrument, keys or whatever.
Yeah, play some keys badly,
but other than the drums and the poetry, I don't play other instruments, so I'm, I got to have other people.
Yeah.
So because of that, I've had situations where I've written something with people, and I had a sort of an idea, a vision in my head of what I thought it would sound like. Yep. I got one song like on my first album called Heads and Tails, and I had a particular sound that I thought it would be like. And it was because a lot of my stuff is blues based, but the guitar player I ended up going into, and there's a part of it a part of the song that sounds like old Stones or something, but there's a part of the song where there's like literally like a 60s doo-wop thing, and I would not change it now.
Right, yeah, that's right.
But I never...
It's unintentional.
I never would have saw it going there,
that's
right.
Yeah. That's cool.
And then, sometimes other people...
there's a cool fluidness.
Calm my impatience or something, or do something. Maybe you have the other person, maybe that says to you, like Braedon, this is already pretty, this is already good, and you could spend another 3 years. Like fiddling with it, or you could release it and then start working. You could have like 10 tracks out, and maybe one of those other ones would blow up or something, right?
Yeah. No, there's something to that too. That's right. Like you said, knowing when to just put it away and go, like this is done. But again, it's like a lot of things. It's a balance and it's a fine line of figuring out. When is the time? Right. When is the when you're comfortable.
The right time.
Yeah, it's a tough one to get onto. That's for sure, because there's always more that you can do, and you can always second guess it or whatever. But
so we're getting down to, because I have this room booked till 3, so we have about
like 20,
15, 16, 17 minutes. It's 2:43. We're out at 3. So just. Some things that we said we might talk about, or that you were kind of interested in, were we talked about the work overload, underload. We talked about the career and stuff.
Yeah. Expectations are big.
We talked a little bit of some stuff that I didn't have written down, which is nice about conversations. Sometimes other people say things and give you ideas that weren't in your head already, which is wonderful. Yeah. But another thing there was performance anxiety and other stressors. Now you have talked about some social media anxiety, but what about performance anxiety? What do you want to say about that?
So I do a lot of shows, and one thing I've noticed, at least with myself, so back when I first started doing shows, it was like I just wanted to get as many as I could, right? I was rushing. I was just trying to like get the stage time in so I could fuck up and make my mistakes and get refine my stage presence for quite a while. And I managed to get a lot of shows in about 2 years span of time, and to the point where I felt like I was pretty comfortable performing live. Which is cool. To this day, I still get I don't want to say stage fright, but I get anxieties and find my worst performances happen when I get anxiety because you're too self-aware and you're thinking too much about who's in the audience. Like my worst show that I can think of, my parents were there. And it was because my parents had never seen me perform before. And I was like, oh my God, what are they going to think? Blah, blah, blah. It was also a big show. Like it was one of the bigger shows I'd done, and I wasn't I was still kind of learning the environment and stuff, and I just wasn't sure exactly how I fit in. And then also, like, the person who was supposed to open was, like, got nervous or something, and they made me open. So it was, like, a weird, like, switch up and stuff. So because of that, I was very anxious. I ended up doing okay. Like, some people in the crowd definitely dug it. I was able to get interaction with the crowd. And for the most part, get interaction with the crowd and stuff. Like, that's good.
It sounded like... I get an interaction from the crowd? It sounded like I managed to get an erection from the crowd.
Well, that's the sign of a good show right there.
That can happen, too, but usually not with the entire crowd. There's usually there's probably usually like one lady or gentleman that you're focusing on. But you actually, I haven't. I don't think I've had an actual.
Never. I've seen videos of artists who have had that. Yeah, I've seen that. Unfortunately, a few times.
What's that, like R. Kelly peeing at people and stuff like that? Or?
I do know, like the singer of Avenged Sevenfold once had definitely some noticeable bulge in metal music in general with the tight pants.
Oh, but they used to in the '80s. They used to put the cucumber in it, like so that was most of those weren't real. Most of those weren't real erections. That was a thing in the '80s. So that they cucumber. Well, that's
talking about false advertising,
and that's why they always used to say it was a running sort of gag with the
that's funny.
with the things was is that a cucumber in your pants, or are you just happy to see me? Right? That actually came from what metal musicians use. With cucumbers or rolled up socks. Like,
that's hilarious.
And
the socks.
That's the
so
80s. You know, I was born in the 70s, but a lot of my growing up happened in the 80s, and it wasn't a time of where authenticity was particularly valued, as much in terms of artists. There was a lot of the glam rock and the image stuff.
Yeah, a lot of like what do you call it, peacocking. Was big. Yeah. So with my shows, a lot I find, because I run my own shows now more than being on other shows. Yeah. I really like. I mean, as much as I love it, it's a love-hate relationship. I love booking the show and being the guy who finds out who's going to be on it and figuring out the time slots and making the poster. I like to do all that stuff. So in general, like, it gets tiring, trust me, too. But so for me, a lot of the stressors come from I'm a performer headlining my own show. Yep. And then I also have to run the show, too. I have to make sure all the acts go well. I'm worried about sound. I'm worried about lighting. I'm worried about getting to the venue on time for fucking sound check. I'm worried about, is everybody else showing up on time? Are they going to be ready for their set when it comes? Because they're wandering out in the audience or drinking.
And there's the chicken and egg stuff, right? Yeah. If you don't know how many people are going to come, then you don't feel comfortable hiring a sound guy, for example, right?
Or telling the artist how much they're going to get paid ahead of time because I'm doing a door split and I don't know if we're going to make any money because it's a night we don't usually do. You know what I mean? Like, I'm big on booking on optimal dates too. I like booking Saturday nights. For me, a Friday night show, which I more recently did, I was actually uncertain because I was like, it's a Friday night. People might not want to come out because they just worked all day. They don't want to be out till 2 a.m. probably. I'll have a better turnout tomorrow night probably. We ended up doing pretty good, so that's one of those fears that's like slightly assuaged or whatever you want to say. But there's always going to be like something like that. Like, a lot of times in the summer too, you end up booking like on the same date as a festival, and then you're like, shoot, is anybody going to come because of that or whatever? So for me, a lot of the stressors from shows come from like all the different aspects of managing the show. So by the time I'm on stage, I wasn't even focused on my own performance. I was focused on everything else, and then now I have to get on stage and perform at the highest level possible because I'm also the headliner.
And you don't really have like as like a hip hop artist, as solo, like you may have a guy on a turntable. You don't have like four other guys that could sort of share the.
No, not really.
If they do it right, sometimes in a band, one guy ends up doing it all, and and ends up feeling, either pressure or maybe they end up feeling resentful, that kind of stuff, right? I know I've seen you've done some stuff with like Alley Cat or whatever. So I know you have people that. That you sort of, collaborate. I like with.
I like to rely on guys like Alley Cat for live shows because Alley Cat, first of all, he's like a real DJ. Whereas if I'm DJing, because I can DJ too. I'm a decent DJ, and I can like with hip hop. Usually you're playing the artist's tracks, right? So
but that's his main thing. So he puts more time and
he's got
and skills
real
into
turntables and he scratches and like so I can be.
Does he
rapping.
use vinyl?
Oh yeah,
wow.
He's like real DJ. That's why I'm like hell yeah because he's hip hop. You know what I mean? And that adds a real cool dynamic to the shows too. It makes an authenticity, like I said, that's a good word for what that adds to our hip hop shows.
By the way, plug for Alley Cat. For the people that don't know who Alley Cat is, do you want to?
Yeah, DJ Alley Cat's been in the scene since the '90s as a hip hop DJ. He's been part of some of the biggest hip hop groups on PEI.
As Mark Valakat, is it?
Yes, Mark Valakat. Yeah, exactly. And he runs the sound at Bubba's a lot too. If you've played Bubba's, you've probably seen him.
Yeah, I've met him since I come back, and so since I've come back and met him, he's a cool guy.
Real one.
He's a nice fella.
One of the core guys of the PEI hip hop scene, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And,
so what are some of the other? Because I was away for so long overseas. You said he was part of some of the big.
Some of the main ones.
What are some of the big hip hop? Like, educate me a little bit in PEI hip hop.
Oh man, Eric Broadbent and Alley Cat have been part of multiple groups. So without going through the list of names of groups they've been through, because it's been quite a few. Different iterations and stuff. Yeah, I'll say just basically if you. There's a large group. I don't want to I hate naming, you know what I mean, in the history of hip hop on PEI because there's so many. There's a lot of artists that have come through PEI hip hop that have helped establish things for the scene in small ways. Yeah,
we're getting. By the way, just interrupt. We're getting a bit of a bump on this.
Oh my bad. I will not kick that.
That's all right. That's all right.
So there's a lot of guys.
It's also me because I didn't say it. It's been going on the whole interview, and I should have said something. I'll just say it's a drum beat. Okay.
That's right.
It's a drum beat. It's a bass drum.
Hopefully it wasn't too bad. But guys like Alley Cat and Broadbent, K-Flow, Adam Robbins. there's like a lot of names. Like I said, I hate naming names because I'll forget names that should be included, and I hate doing that. But Alley Cat's just been always there, and if he wasn't in the group as a direct member, he was helping beats, somehow, or he was doing the shows or whatever. He was always just like a staple of it. So part of the reason that I have him on is because out of like a respect thing for the scene. Like big thing in hip hop is like respecting the scene that you come from.
Yep.
And so for me, I always try and include some of these, like, I don't want to call them legacy acts, but acts that came before me on the bill. And I also try and include upcoming acts too. I always have somebody, usually they're the opener or one of the earlier ones to get their feet.
I've never met this guy personally, but he's the son of a guy that I've known for many, many, many years. So if you come across a guy named KM,
of course, Carrie and I have worked together many times. KM's dope. KM's one of the dudes in the scene who does everything too. He's like me. He'll edit his videos, he'll shoot his videos, he'll produce beats. He makes a lot of beats for other people. He's made beats for me. Actually, I've got a new song we're working on, which has got a really fun hook. I can't wait for it. It's like a soul sample in it, which I haven't done before. It's really fun. I can't wait to finish that. But he helped me also. He produced my song "Real Ones," which is one of my favorite songs to date, and it's one of my for live songs. It's gotten some of the best reactions because it's a super grounded, like you said, real song. It's not a sing along chorus. It's like I call it a prayer because it's literally just like I recite. Like people that I consider real ones. So people I've met in my life that influenced me or made an impact on me. So I talk about an old man who I never got to say goodbye to. I talk about friends who never made the right decisions in life. I mean, you know what I mean? Like lessons. It's about lessons. So anyways, KM helped produce that beat, and it's like one of my favorite, when I perform it to this day, I get emotional. And seeing other people in the crowd get emotional and tell me after the show, like, hey, that song, I felt something. And that to me is like, that's what I make it for. So KM's one of those dudes I've got so much respect for because he will never put in for an award for himself either. He puts in the work. He'll produce for other people, create for other people, does the shows. But don't you have,
for Music PEI, don't you have to initially apply yourself?
So you can apply. You can nominate other people.
Oh, you can?
I'm not sure if they have to be a member or not. That's something maybe to consider. You can, look, if,
Because I've nominated myself and it always feels But now that I understand that that's just the initial one, then somebody picks if you're going to be going up for... So. Because when I heard that, I was like, they say I got nominated, and then I was thinking, of course I did. I nominated myself. But then you still got to get chosen. Like, I've never been chosen to go past that, next thing.
You apply for the nomination, essentially. And then whoever, and then there's like
and
five,
then they nominate
nominees.
you from the people that applied.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, once I learned that, it made a bit more sense. But at first, it was like, I've been nominated for like 11... blah, 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 awards.
Well, it's funny, too, because people, and this is all levels of the music industry, remember, people at the highest level, Grammys, it's a manager that's putting it in usually. But
they're still representing you, right? It's not like...
And a lot of artists are independent these days, or they run most of their own business. A lot of them are putting themselves in for these awards. People have to remember it.
But I guess it's part of the job. You still got to...
People don't think about it. It's part of the job.
And if there still has to be somebody that's making that choice out of the people that nominated you, then it's still legit.
Yeah, and it's a promotional opportunity. Like there's a lot of good reasons to try and apply for awards and apply for anything. I mean, you got to apply for grants too. People don't think about it, but a lot of artists, if they're not applying for an award, they might be applying for grants, and that's more paperwork. That's not. I
haven't applied for any grants yet. I've. I do most of my own production, that stuff, but I mean, definitely a grant to. Because I'm, what I have now, I've used, as far as mastering, I've done it myself with, the AI tool. I'm not an expert in mastering, but again, it's one of those things. How much money or whatever, or time or effort, and, my guitar player listens to it and he thinks it sounds great. He's got a friend that's apparently an audio file that says, I'm getting better guitar sounds than a lot of people out there. But I still think it would be, having that expert is going to bump it up, a notch. But maybe at the level I'm at now, maybe it's, maybe it is good, because I have to try to find a job. I have to do some other things in life. But
there's always, like you said, the balance. Like if you feel like. What I would say is, in that case, because I've had problems with mixes before, put it out to, find websites or whatever where you can share music with other listeners, or like you said, get feedback from other people who listen, and then they can, a lot of times, mixing is such a stupid subjective thing. You'll put out I'll put in a song for playlisting. One guy will tell me he's not putting on the playlist because the mixing, the drum beat was too muddy. And the next guy will say, I feel like the drums could kick more. And the next guy will say, I feel like the drums are great.
So subjective.
Yeah.
Right? So subjective, there's even such a thing as and it was big in the, I'd say, 90s, 2000s with bands like Eric's Trip and stuff, where their thing was lo-fi. They wanted it to sound
like it was recorded like cheap as possible
as possible, right? So that's all that's a like a choice. And I like
aesthetic now.
Do you listen to like Rick Beato's podcast at all?
Cool. I not a ton, but I have him on YouTube. I see his YouTube.
Yeah. So because he came from. He was a jazz musician, then a teacher, then he was a music producer, and he talks about the production element. And what I really like is how he talks about how these different big producers, they all have their own unique thing, right? And I remember he was talking about like Pearl Jam's album that went big. I'm not really a big Pearl Jam fan, but. And apparently their first album, 10, it's got this sort of big, like, reverb kind of sound, and apparently the band didn't like that. They wanted to re-release it with less of that, right? And then you've got
Beatles have famously done it with Let It Be, right? Let It Be, Phil Spector version, the Beatles original version. I think there's like 3 versions of Abbey Road.
And then a lot of those things too back then. Sometimes they had a lot less channels, and sometimes drums were panned a lot differently than they're done now. So. I don't agree with this, like, that there's a hard
rule. Oh, yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean? It's like you want it to sort of sound
consistent with others,
kind of
maybe
good. With your particular parameters of what good is.
I think like genre constraints is a good way to go to. Like if you're making dance music, does your drum kick sound somewhat as decent or around as decent as other ones in the genre? Because what you don't want is like, when your song is played amongst other songs, it should stand out, but not based on the quality of the audio, right? So so if one song's got really wicked kick, but then your song's got shit kick, and then their song's got wicked kick, you're going to stand out as the lower quality out of the 3 because of that. You know what I mean? So sonically, there does need to be like parameters.
But sometimes there's somebody does something different that everybody says. You have to do it this way, and that's what makes them friggin' blow up. Like the drum sound in the Phil Collins head with the heavy compression or whatever it was.
They cycled it through their monitors twice or something. There was some weird sound that they did. That
you know what I mean. And then that became what made that like become multi-platinum, and then everybody was copying it. So I think there's you got to have a healthy amount of like
build rules and break them. Yeah, there's always something.
Listening to people but not listening to them. You know what I mean? Like sometimes what people say you should maybe consider it and listen to it, but you also I think you have to have
like a
faith in yourself to say that I can see that might because I also think you could have a producer that's extremely talented but maybe they're not on the same page. Right? Like for me, for the stuff I'm doing, like the the kind of trippy, psychedelic, blues, jazz, funk, reggae, poetry stuff. If I had a producer that's thinking like, I want to change this guy into being
some like
Justin Bieber or something. Like he'd basically ruin what I have, right? Because my stuff is likely not meant to have that wide
appeal or whatever.
Like appeal or something, right? But you get the right person, like say like Rick Rubin doesn't know how to use like the audio production stuff. He's not really much of a musician, but what he said, I saw the interviews with him. He said, I trust my. What did he say? I trust my taste in music. So he's more like the vision. Like he'll. But I also think he will.
What was the
He will see the artist, and he'll stay within what fits them, but he'll still mold them.
For
and
sure.
maybe
I think there's like it's almost like if there's a sculpture and he's like, oh, okay, the nose is a little rough, and then this is a little. We'll kind of fix that a little. You know what I mean? Like what he's good is if the artist shows up with 90% or 80% of the idea, he can go, oh, okay, this is the refinement. Like, you know what I mean? He's really good at stripping away that other shit. One of the best things, and Rick Rubin's known for doing this, he'll strip away a lot of stuff. Like if you listen to, he produced Minutes to Midnight by Linkin Park, their third record. And what that record did, took away all the electronic elements and made them a rock band. Because his idea was like, well,
so
what if
Linkin
Linkin
Park...
they had
a heavy electronica thing before that? Or?
Yeah, so their first 2 albums were like largely electronic rap rock. So it was like screaming vocals in the choruses or sing-along choruses with rapping in the verses, and
so like closer to a Nine Inch Nails, where the instrumental part was more electronic, but it sounded like metal. It
heavy distorted guitars and electronic drums and stuff. So there was like a lot going on. And his thing was like, what if you're just a rock band? So less distortion on the guitars, maybe like more old school vintage style guitar sounds, and then real drums, and all that stuff. And that's where they got some of their biggest hits. What I've Done, Bleed It Out. Some of their bigger hits came from that. And from that, they went, oh, okay, we don't need to rely on what we thought we were.
Yes.
We can, it almost opens up the playing field. So like you said, there is definitely a level of, we need to take that outside feedback and then still keep our creative idea and identity, but then maybe adjust a little bit and refine
I think any successful band that's had, and we're gonna have to wrap this up because the room's somebody's going to be coming in. But any successful band that's had any staying power has had their phases.
Yes.
The Rolling Stones in their blah blah phase, the Beatles in their blah blah phase, right? So like, maybe not AC/DC.
They've always been pretty much the same.
They've got a formula, and they're the best at it.
Yeah.
And they,
and there's something to consistency too, right? A reliable brand is something that a lot of people forget about.
But even with the production, different productions, it has changed some, right?
Sure.
So, anyways, because somebody's probably going to be needing this. Last words.
Yeah.
If you wanted to say like a few sentences about. Wrapping it up with, let's say coping mechanisms plus anything coming up that you want to plug.
I don't have any shows coming up till June, I think 10th, so keep an eye out on my socials. Follow me on Instagram if you want.
Hopefully I have this up by then.
No worries if you don't, that's all right. It'll be closer to it if anything, so that'd be good maybe. So for me, I think to wrap it, I would say like coping mechanisms, like for artists, we started making art probably as a coping mechanism anyway, as a form of releasing something internal. Yeah, at least on some level, there's an internal thing that you're trying to get out. So I think, and this is from my own experience in the last year especially, because at my last record, I really tried to like get out some demons almost with the record. And I'm super proud of the record because it ended up being cathartic because of that. Yeah. So what I would say as a wrap up for artists is like, you started making art probably as a means to express yourself. And if you feel any type of issue, negative, positive, whatever, if you express that through art, the medium that you've started doing it anyway through, you will probably feel better. So it's like the problem with making music and getting mental health issues because of all the bullshit around it, the solution is also in just making the music and forgetting all that other shit around it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's because it's so easy to focus on all the other shit. But if you just focus on, okay, I feel a thing, whatever the fuck it is, maybe I feel like I'm not heard. Maybe I can make a song about people that don't feel heard or needing to feel heard or whatever. You know what I mean? Like there's a 100% of catharsis that happens from that. And then for me, performing it in front of people after it's done has been unbelievably cathartic to the point of now I feel like I need to tell other people, like, hey, you feel like shit. Yeah, like, oh, you're bothered by something? Go make a fucking... And it doesn't have to be like...
An album.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a diss track either. It doesn't have... Like, you know what I mean? Like, your boss pisses you off. You don't have to drop a diss track on your boss. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, like, you can take whatever those emotions are, the core emotions, and make music about that. Because that's what music's about ultimately, is a core emotion.
And I think if you're not a musician, I would say, just express them somehow?
Well, yeah.
Right? Like, whether it's talk to somebody or...
Go hit a punching bag.
Draw a picture, do something like 100%. Don't let us sit in there.
That's the biggest issue, I think, and the people that I know that are most unhappy are sitting, like you said, they're sitting in it, they're wallowing, and they're not getting out of that bubble of negative, that spiral. Because I do this, I spiral. I get, something goes wrong or two things go wrong, and then I'm like, worse. And to get out of that and find a way to break out of that before it starts spiraling down.
Because that can be the thing with a lot of mental health issues. Like it lies to our brain. Because I've had depression,
100%.
Depression and stuff like that, where it says, if I tell people this, they're going to think I'm. They're going to think I'm useless or something. And then you say it, and they're like, they didn't react that way.
Right.
And you realize, wow, like, this was all... I read a book
Your
once.
brain lied to you 100%.
I read a book once called The Beast, and it was she was a award-winning journalist.
Right.
I forget her name.
I've heard about this.
And it's all these kind of things that are, her... maybe so long ago I read it, but I think she called that depression the beast. I mean, it's that thing in between your ears that's
Yep. It's the devil in your ear, right?
Friggin' lying to you and telling you that you're not worth, living, or you're not worth,
or this sucks. Everything you do sucks.
Doing something to yourself, or I'm not. It's not worth spending $100 to go see a therapist because I'm not worth it. Like it's all this. It's the condition is talking to you.
That's right. Yeah. No, that's right. And like you said, it's your brain lying to you.
Yep.
People forget that. That's a
we
great
better get out of here. So thanks again.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Braedon V for being my guest, and please like, share, and subscribe, and comment, and do all that stuff if you like what you hear. I'm Trevor Lowell Clements. Thank you very much for listening. Let's give a good Borat. High five. High five. Very nice. Very nice.